Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it is for you. Thank you all for tuning in to your daily dose of donkey with Ginger. This is Sports Talk. We're coming at you to talk about the Steelers' offseason needs. I am once again going solo tonight. Gingy should be back with us next week. But Jackson Jennings, it's that time. It's time to look at the Steelers roster. It's time to figure out, do we have holes that can still be filled? The draft's done. Main part of free agency's done. But there are still players out there looking for a team, and there are still some holes that probably can be filled on our roster. So first, let's start on the offense. Let's start at the most critical position on a football team, and that's the quarterback. Steelers clearly said here, clearly don't need to be looking out there for any like Brett Huntley types at this time, as we have Mason Rudolph, Josh Dobbs, Dewey Haskins, and of course, future Hall of Famer Ben Roethlisberger. But let's get into a position that maybe could use a little help. We'll go to the fullback, but we'll go fullback tight end because those positions kind of run together a little bit now. I mean, you got Watt, you got Ebron, you got Freiermouth, but the thing I'm seeing here is there's no blocking tight end in there. There's still a couple guys available out there who could be really good upgrades. I mean, remember, Jesse James was our starting tight end for a while. I mean, he could fit back in here really nicely and could look pretty darn good in a Steelers uniform again. And I think that's a fair look into there. And I mean, outside of that, if you don't want to take a chance on him, if you believe you have the blocking done, you could say, this team is set in that position. And I wouldn't argue too hard. We get into running backs. I mean, Benny Snell, Jalen Samuel, the big addition of Najee Harris, but does that mean a veteran still can't be brought in? Does that mean we shouldn't be looking at bring in, I don't know, an Adrian Peterson type of guy, someone who's towards the end of their career, but, will still bring something on the offensive side of the ball? I mean, Le'Veon Bell's still available out there, though I'm not sure about that one. The names that I'm really actually interested in, I don't think Duke Johnson signed yet, and I don't think Todd Gurley signed yet. And those are two guys who have got the job done before, and let's be honest, there's a lot of potential there. Maybe they can find one more ride, one more good season, and Najee Harris has never played in 16 games in a year, yet alone 17 regular season games. So you want him to be full strength to go in the playoffs. I think you need a back that can spell with him. And if you want to improve the running game, I mean, the line doesn't look very improved, so don't expect better numbers out of Benny Snell. Don't expect better numbers out of Jalen Samuels. And if you're not getting better production out of them, you got to find someone who can bring it. So running back's a spot I'd really like to see the Steelers take a low-risk signing on and bring in someone out there. I mean, it is what it is. There's a little bit of a need there. Then we get to the position that I would personally love to see them bring in a veteran. I've said it before. I think that wide receiving core could really use a veteran presence in it. But it's clear you have your four guys, and the Steelers don't seem to be moving one of them unless a trade happens. And then your fifth receiver right now is your all-around specialist who really fits into the Matt Canada offense. So I guess wide receiver, totally set. If they bring in a veteran just for locker room presence like a Larry Fitzgerald, I wouldn't be upset, but not sure I see that happening. And now that brings us to, oh boy, offensive line. We drafted a guy in the third round who everybody, Kendrick Green, everybody's like, oh, he's going to start at center. I'd be a little nervous about that. They're like, Brown and Okorafor will get the job done at left tackle. I'm a little nervous about that. Offensive line to me right now is, and there's some guys out there. I think Mitchell Schwartz, Russell Okung are still out there as tackles, like Rick Wagner, played a little bit in Green Bay. You have Austin Reeder, who was a center for Kansas City. I mean, DeMar Dotson, I believe he's a former Steelers out there. He's a little older, but I mean, at some point, I would love to see any of these guys who have starting experience brought in just to compete, because I am not sold on what the Steelers have. Hell, I would settle for, if Jason Peters hasn't announced his retirement yet, bringing his little 40-year-old ass in, because heck, if we're going to make it to getting better, the more competition, the merrier, because this offensive line, bringing back the same guys and expecting a huge uptick in production, scares me. I understand a lot of these veterans aren't guaranteed improvements, but the thing is, You bring them in, you bring in the competition. Hopefully, one of them is an improvement, and hopefully, it works out well because, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I am really nervous about this offensive line. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'll say it a million times. It is just nerve-wracking thinking that was the weakest part of our team, and we didn't even spend an early round draft pick on fixing it. But it is what it is. So let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. I mean, defensive line, you're stout. You have a lot of young guys. You have talented veterans there. I mean, you brought back your top 4 guys from last year with Alu, Tuitt, Hayward, and I guess you could say Wormley, but let's hope he gets replaced by one of the young guns. So defensive line set. Outside linebacker, I'm sorry, but I like the pick of Quincy Roche, but I don't see how that fills the depth role. Like, I hope he turns out well. I think it'll take him a little while. I think maybe he could get in and get some rotational snaps. I like Cassius Marsh as a depth guy, like bottom depth guy, but the thing is there's no immediate depth on this team right now. And when you have guys still out there like Vic Beasley, Ryan Kerrigan, I mean, there's guys who have great starting experience. Do you not have to go find one of them? I mean, have Jabal Sheard, since I'm a Pitt guy. Let's use Jabal Sheard as a guy who can go out there. I mean, Trent Murphy got let go by Buffalo. I mean, more of a 4-3 end, but still could fit into the system. You're talking, if you want Olivier Vernon, if you think he can come back from that rupture. You're talking you want to bring in another guy coming off injuries, Melvin Ingram. Pure veteran guy out there, Justin Houston. I mean, there's a lot of talented depth. I know cap might be a little bit of an issue bringing in these guys, but why not bring in one of them on a prove-it deal and then move, since we've already moved money into next year. It's clear you're trying to build for this year. I don't think it's the smartest thing to do, but they already committed to it. Why not move some money from one of your contracts into next year? Why not take one of these guys on? Why not see what can happen? Because honestly, the only depth we have is either unproven or a journeyman who's never really got it going. That brings us to middle linebacker, where our depth is actually really good if Devin Bush is back and healthy. I mean, Spillane, Vince Williams out there. You bring in Buddy Johnson, you just signed him. You also have Allen still on the roster. Killebrew could play down into middle linebacker. There's a lot of depth at middle linebacker. I don't know if it's good depth, and honestly, I don't know if there's any good depth out there to be had. There's some veterans who have clearly lost a step. I'm not seeing anyone who's really worth taking a flyer on in middle linebacker. I mean, I'm sure you could find someone. I'm sure they might find someone, but this is a position I don't think you need to do it because the depth is there. Bringing back Vince Williams really shored that up to me. I mean, the coverage liability is still a problem, but that's why you have safeties that can play in the box, right? So that leads us to the secondary. Huge need now at cornerback because cutting Steven Nelson was a weird move. I don't think there's any chance of getting him back. I don't think he would want to, but if he would want to, I'd be like, yeah, sign him up, Steven Nelson, let's go. That would be a good bring back. But clearly, if Cam Sutton's going to be given the shot on the outside first, then you're looking more slot corners. I mean, you could bring in Brian Poole, who could play both the slot and the outside. You can bring in guys like, I don't know, Daquiz Denard if you want to bring in a outside guy and move Sutton inside on the dime package plays, which they've done before. You could bring in a pure slot guy like Nickel Roby-Coleman, who honestly I wouldn't mind bringing him in because there's a lot of need there. Again, you could bring in Gary and Conley. I mean, there's a lot of names at corner, and the fact that the Steelers haven't signed any outside people to be a corner is really, really concerning to me because we keep cutting it. And if you watched Joe Hayden last year, he struggled in plays that lasted more than 2.5 seconds. So if you weren't getting to the quarterback, if TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, the defensive line weren't getting to the quarterback, Joe Hayden was breaking down in coverage. And the thing is, he's a year older now. I'm not sure he's going to get any faster. I'm not sure that's going to get any better. And if the pass rush is any worse than it was, which, by the way, best in the league, if you're not best in the league, does that start exposing over there? And this faith in the Steelers to find good corners and be like, oh, it's easy. Yeah, losing Steven Nelson, who's maybe just a good starter, maybe nothing special. Oh, it's easy to replace cornerbacks. Does everyone forget the past decade after, like, Ike Taylor retired, where we didn't have a single starting caliber cornerback, it felt like, for 8 years? It just seems that everyone's memory has just skipped over the fact that for the longest time, the Steelers couldn't even find a starting caliber corner. I mean, we were starting guys like Bryce McCann off the scrap heap. I mean, oi, 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 oi. You would think this was never the team that was able to draft someone like Hot Rod Woodson. I mean, the just wasted draft capitals on guys like Richard Coakley. You could name 1,000 of them too, and it just, whatever reason, never worked. And we finally got two good starting corners, and we decide we're going to cut one without even trying to restructure him just because, we don't need two starting corners. I mean, we had two proven guys. We're going to give it to our drafted guy who looked good in the slot, but wasn't even our primary slot guy. And the thing is, I do love Cam Sutton. I think he could be a great slot guy. I'm nervous with him on the outside. I've said that before. And the fact that we're going in there without a backup plan is scary. And that is I will get to that in a minute. But first, let's talk about safety. I actually think safety is the one spot we're really good. You could have Killebrew play there. I believe you returning both starters from last year. I believe they brought in Mallet to play in there. I mean, this is just, the safeties are there. Dangerfield's back, I believe, too. That's who I was looking for. I don't think the safety's a problem, but depth in almost every other position seems to be non-existent. And that's what scares me about this Steelers team. And the thing is, it showed last year. I mean, last year we had better depth than we have this year going into it. But hear me out on this. All our depth is gone. Last year, when we suffered injuries, it showed because we didn't have the depth. The team just kept getting worse and worse. Take Devin Bush. I mean, Spillane stepped up better than anyone could have ever imagined, right? The defense still wasn't quite the same without Bush. And then we suffer our second injury, and Dupree goes down. And then the defense was just bad without Bud Dupree. With Bush and Dupree both gone, that defense was bad. The thing is, we're building a team to give Ben one last run. If you're going to build a team in the NFL, especially in a season where the year's going to last longer than ever. There's an extra game now. There is a 17th game. And next week, I hope we get into the schedule. I'll give you my predictions on what games I think the Steelers will win, what games I think they'll lose. I still feel 8-8-1 is the way it's going to go. I have to figure out how to make that work. But you're going into that longest season, and you're going in with zero depth. Outside of wide receiver, if an injury happens anywhere on this team, the Steelers are probably in panic mode. You're probably starting J.C. Hassenhauer's, Cassius Marsh's in every single position if one injury happens. I mean, honestly, the position outside of wide receiver that we might be most able to take an injury to is quarterback. How is that a thing where the Hall of Famer on this team might be the guy who's actually the easiest to be replaced? How did the Steelers fall to a part where neither one of their tackles are a proven entity and there's not a proven backup to really push them? Neither one of their one of their guards, one of the two guys who's going to start at guard, is a proven entity. One's a good-looking rookie from last year. But if either one gets hurt, they're starting a complete wild card. At center, you have BJ Finney as a proven entity, which means, a backup center. So you have a backup center for sure, and then a bunch of wild cards. You go to tight end, you have Ebron and a bunch of wild cards. You go to wide receiver, you have four really inconsistent guys, to say the best about him. I mean, Juju's probably the most consistent with his hands. DJ's probably the most consistent to break open a game, and the biggest deep play threat is clearly Mapletron. But none of them are really put up a consistent year outside of Juju doing it when he played beside Antonio Brown. There's no consistency there. Running back, you're going in with guys who are questionable right now, back of the roster type of running backs like Benny Snell and guys like that, and a complete wild card question mark in your first round pick, Najee Harris. But again, he goes down. There's no backup plan. So we're here sitting thinking this could be a good year for the Steelers if we could find a way to actually keep everybody healthy. But that's never easy. It never happened. And planning for that to be the way, just ridiculous. So the offense was the problem last year, though. So you're like, well, that's okay because this is a defensive team and the defense is still good. And I'll give you this. The defensive line still has all three starters. But we saw what happened when any of them missed a game. People ran all over us, like Baltimore. I mean, when Alu was out, people were running it right down our throat because that line's just not strong when all there. We didn't add any depth there. We drafted a guy in the 5th round who everybody thought would be an undrafted free agent type. I mean, I don't see anyone, maybe Bugs or Davis steps up, and we do have depth there, but if it's Wormley, it's not looking good. So you're talking no depth on defensive line, and heaven forbid, last year we actually almost had a fully healthy season out of Tuitt and Hayward. Knock on wood that happens again, but that has never happened before for the Steelers. Let's go to outside linebacker, our only depth piece, which, by the way, if you watched when he had to step into the starter, was a huge downgrade in Highsmith. I mean, now it's Highsmith is starting and there's no depth behind them. What happens if one of them gets hurt? Middle linebacker is the only spot you can say we're going into the season as good as we were last year. And I'll give you that. And we did show depth there with Spillane and Williams, and we have them both back. But we saw how weak it is without Devin Bush. There's no second athletic linebacker. The Buck linebackers there. The run stoppers there. We have depth at the run stopper. Hell, I think Buddy Johnson could be a good run stopper. I said when I drafted him, he reminds me of Vince Williams. But the problem is we still haven't addressed the fact that, unless you're thinking it's Killebrew, and if you think it's Killebrew, then I guess maybe we did. But they didn't really address that there's no secondary athletic linebacker out there that can cover. Maybe it is Killebrew and maybe I'm missing something. I think our safety depth got better with the addition of Killebrew, but then you go to cornerback. Cornerback, we were running 2 deep slot corners that were really good. Now we're running a complete wild card with probably Pierre taking the main parts of the snaps there. But you look at it, the depth is just gone on this team. This team is literally one injury away from being in bad straits in a position. I don't like it. There are still pieces out there. I've not heard the Steelers bringing anyone in. I know this isn't the Steeler way, but they need to get active right now. This team needs to add some depth. And I hate to say this because I've been a pure person saying don't do this. They need to push a little bit of money into next year because they decided to go for it this year, which means the rebuild isn't starting. So you can't start the rebuild next year, or be in this phase 2 of the rebuild next year because you never started it this year. So push the money into next year. Spend to get some of these veteran free agents who at least, even if they don't start because they don't prove to be better than the guy in front of them, the young wild cards, at least it provides some depth. If something should happen, we're not signing J.C. Hassenauer off the street and starting him. I mean, that was terrible. And that's what this team is right now. It's literally every position is that way, though. The depth is gone. I mean, I'm scared. I'm nervous. I don't like it. I wish we would have started the rebuild. I'm here trying to say we're not there, though, so let's go for it. And to go for it, you need to have depth. It's the same as in baseball. Sure, your starting 11 can look good, but that's not where you win. That's where you win games. That's not where you win championships. Championship teams are teams that can go 2-3 deep and be competitive. Look at Tampa last year. Took a lot of injuries, lost Vita Vea for like half the year. But the thing is, they had depth. Look at their depth at running back. Look at their depth at wide receiver. Look at the depth at tight end. outside of quarterback, there was depth on that roster everywhere. And that is how you win championships. Heck, I think they were starting like 3 or 4 backups from what their original roster was in their secondary during their playoff run because the depth was there. The higher draft picks, the talented guys. I mean, that's what you need. You need depth if you're going to win a championship. So if the Steelers are coming out here just trying to be like, hey, we want to make the playoffs and that's a good send-off for Ben, cool. Go run with the roster you have and hope you don't get hurt. But if our goal is to get a championship, we need to start signing some guys to bring in some depth. There's a lot of good free agents out there. There's a lot of good signings still to be made. I mean, just do something. Don't do it the Steeler way. The Steeler way hasn't been working for the past decade. It's been shown before. I mean, look what happens when we lose someone like Le'Veon Bell in the playoffs. It's just shown the Steeler way has not been effective since the 2010s. Let's be honest, the 2010s. Like 2010, 2011 is what I mean. The 2010s, the Steeler way was, we'll make the playoffs, but we sure as hell ain't going to do anything in the playoffs. And everyone's going to be like, well, that's because someone got hurt. That's because of bad luck. No, that's because of bad roster construction. Because you should never be outside it. If it was Ben Roethlisberger, I could agree with you. Because losing a quarterback, you can't really have a great replacement on hand because they're too expensive. But Steeler roster construction made it to where if you lose one player, your playoffs are done. And we're going into this season running back the same worn-out strategy. And I just don't see how the results are going to be different. I really hope they are. But unless I see something like signings, I'm not going to feel that way. That's enough about Steeler roster construction. I have one more topic I want to talk about before I get to shout-outs or leaving. And that is, why the hell has the NFLPA not guaranteed contracts yet? Why have they not fought for guaranteed contracts like almost every other major sport? You're talking basketball, baseball. I think even hockey has mostly guaranteed contracts. The only one is the biggest one. And how doesn't that happen? I mean, look at 2 poor people in Denver that are going to get screwed over. Juwan James is about to lose $10 million because he was working out on his own because the NFLPA told them not to attend mini camps, but instead work out on their own. And now he's getting a non-football related injury release and losing $10 million. Deshaun Hamilton lost a trade and is going to lose $2 million because Denver is about to cut him. Because he got hurt away from camp working out on his own because that's what they told him to do because they're like, don't attend mini camps without COVID protocols. But then the NFLPA doesn't seem to be backing these guys up. It seems like they just said, hey, here it goes. And as soon as someone went out and did that, it got hurt. The NFLPA is like, well, we don't agree with what the NFL is doing, but we're really not going to fight them, even though we're the ones who set you in this bad precedent. I mean, I hate to say it, because I've seen players, and I hate players having all the control, but the way they get treated by teams, you can't blame them. And I hope the NFLPA gets these guys guaranteed contracts because they don't deserve to lose a bunch of money because, heaven forbid, they get hurt performing for the team that signed them. I mean, these guys sign to play with the team and could get traded the next day. They get treated like a trading card, essentially. Like, they get treated like they're a video game currency. It's just, let these guys get their fully guaranteed money. They deserve it. They signed for it. You shouldn't be able to just be like, oh yeah, but now we're not going to give you your money because we're upset. It's just ridiculous. And please, NFL, on your next CBA, right the wrong and give these guys all their money. Let them earn it, because it's not like any owner or any coach or any team is doing bad monetarily. So come on, these guys play a violent sport for our entertainment. The least the teams can do for these guys that give their body, their youth, and sometimes their lives for their team is give them all the money you say you're going to. With that, thank you all for tuning in today. I'm going to go ahead and go to shout-outs. And this week, my shout-out is to all the rookies going out and attending their first camp, for all the teams getting their first taste of NFL action. Oh, I really, really hope it works out for all of them. And I hope all of you make your team because all of you deserve some money to get going and some lifetime benefits. So go out there, earn those dollars, earn those contracts, prove what you got going. Thanks all to Jackson Jennings for tuning in this week. As always, you can catch me at Viking Donkey on Xbox, Viking_Donkey on Twitch and Twitter. Feel free to catch the live cast whenever I do it. You can come in and you can join us at the Daily Dose of Donkey with Ginger YouTube channel, which is where all this goes up. You know it. Leave us a comment, send us an email, send me a tweet, hit me up with a message on Xbox. However you want to get in contact, let me know what you're thinking about the Steelers offseason, other teams' offseasons that you want me to look into and see what I see going on in those rosters. Or, heck, you just have anything you want to say about how terrible I am and how much you hate my show, feel free to leave those comments too. Any criticism is good criticism. Any feedback is good feedback, because at the end of the day, it helps me make a better product for everybody who's out there and willing to tune in and willing to support. I love y'all for the support. I thank y'all for the support. And you know what to do, Steeler Nation. Wave 'em if you got 'em, baby. Wave 'em if you got 'em.